In a world where kingdoms fall and stars still remember names, this song was forged from magic memory and the dream that refused to die. Welcome to a tale where wonder still breathes. This is the short story The Confession Made of Stickers, a love fable beyond words for my Monbiol, created by Pacampara. If this tale stirred something in you, a memory, a dream, or a truth, our Ko-fi, Amazon, and Patreon links are in the description. Support helps us keep writing for you and the ones you hold dear. The evening ripened like the way a fig does, quietly, and the sweetness swelling beneath its skin until the slightest touch turned it generous. Lamps along the palace colonnade woke one by one with small contented sighs. From the garden device looped like gold threads and curtains, and somewhere a kettle sang 3 notes before falling silent, as if it had suddenly remembered the hour. Just stood in the courtyard with a shoebox of stars and prayer, the world's simplest magic, listening to the hush that arrives after sunset when the birds agree to surrender the sky. Inside the box, stickers had cut by hand and burnished with his thumb until each felt warm to the touch. Some were shaped like planets with powdered shimmer, some like little rain clouds with silver edges. Others were just clean ovals waiting to be named. Names mattered, words mattered. He had learned that from Jiun, who once told him that a word well placed was a lantern you didn't have to carry. It kept walking with you. He had promised Young and Win he'd keep the surprise small. Small, he said, at noon, holding up his hands like a fisherman pretending to be humble. Young's laugh had come soft like an envelope opening. Then keep it small, she'd said, but let it feel endless. Endless streak, he had replied, touching the back of his neck. No, if you meant it, Win had added, nudging him with the top of her head the way a cat nudges a palm. And not if you spell check. Now with the marble wall he had chosen, facing the garden, near the ark where the Gonvilla blazed, waited like an unplayed instrument. He peeled the first sticker and pressed it to the stone. Brave, the second. Gorgeous, then stubborn, because he loved the way Buell argued with inevitability and usually won. Tender came next, and foolish, because nothing as grand as love escapes foolishness, and perhaps that's the point. He kept going, bright, storm, wildfire, milk tea laugh, rain wanderer, constellations, until the wall had begun to look like a galaxy inventing itself. Above him, footsteps ghosted along the balcony. Young's measured hush, Win's pattered, then a third rhythm, light as a melody finding its key. Yejin, she leaned over the railing like the moon, bending to see her reflection. So she called down, voice warm with mischief, "Our emperor is vandalizing his own palace. It's artisanal vandalism," Jess whispered back. "Do you need help?" Young's question was gentle, but it wore the smile he'd fallen in love with, the one that said he already knew the answer. "I will never refuse help," he said, and it meant more than the wall. Win arrived first, barefoot, whispering over the grass. She took the pen from behind his ear, read the unfixed stack of blank ovals, and began writing as if the words were being told to her from a secret window in the air. "Sincere home, meet your heart. She'll tease us for this," Win murmured, then reread it 100 times when the house sleeps. Yejin came down with a spool of gold thread. She tied lengths around the arches to the stickers would have halos when the lamps spurred their light. Buell pretends she likes noise, she said, tongue caught between her teeth as she worked. Really, she likes the kind of quiet that's chosen like this. At last, Jiyoon drifted from the rehearsal hall, the last of a song still hemming in the air around her. She pressed her palm to Jess's shoulder. It was an old pledge between them, a promise to steady each other when the heart rushed ahead. "You're still the boy who leaves notes when morning can find them," she said, smiling in the way that turned memory into a guest at the table. "I'm still learning where to put the question mark," he answered. Gian's eyes went to the single black space he had kept at the center, where a star might belong. "Then ask it the way you want it answered," she whispered. He wrote the smallest word he had ever dared: "Mine." The question was about disguised as the door left open. He stepped back and the wall breathed. "Breathe," Young echoed, as if catching the same arrival in her own chest. "It's almost time. Don't hide," being warned, reading his posture like an old map. "When she looks for you, be there. That's the whole thing." "I'll be there," he said. He heard Buell before he saw her. The silver of her laugh, the tiny chorus of a handled radio she never admitted she loved. A few bars of a song drifted with her, something like yellow but melted down to just a hum. She rounded the arc still, tugging a hoodie down her arms, hair up and her eyes midnight. She stopped, the radio forgot itself, and the courtyard pressed its own pause. "What's this?" she asked, incredulous and careful at once, like a child entering a place she had dreamed too many times to trust. From the balcony, Young and VE and Yejin clinked invisible glasses. Jiun hummed the chord under her breath, a chord he'd heard beneath the plum blossoms once, when he didn't know that people could be seasons, and the chord held. Buell broke the kiss with a grin that turned serious at its edges. "You did this with your hands," and she pressed her forehead to his. "You could have written just one word on a napkin, and I would have come running." "I didn't trust a napkin," he said. "You trust me with the parts of me I didn't even like," he said, before he could edit the last sentence into something less true. Her eyes softened. "Then the answer is yes," she said, and her yes tasted like the sleep after a long journey. She slipped a pen from his pocket the way thieves do in comedies. Kneeling, and she wrote in the corner where Young had pointed to a space. She put a period, then reconsidered and drew a small star instead. "Balance," Wayne whispered. "Please, question and answer." Vagin wiped under her eye with the back of her finger and made a face at herself for doing it. Jiun touched the wall with two fingers and leaned her head to it the way believers lean to old doors. Young watched the light to touch all the words and thought of mornings Jess had made ordinary tasks into rituals. How he poured tea like it was a letter. How he folded blankets like it was the last chore before sleep. Took attendance. And how when any of them worried they were too much for a single life, he simply widened it. "Come," he said at last, because saying stay and come are often the same invitation when you built your house inside of each other. "Before the city remembers us, the hill is clear tonight." They went stargazing, because you must choose to be simple when you can afford to be grand. The pot up the hill was a ribbon of pale dust, the kind that gets on your calves and refuses to leave until morning, which is his own way of swearing it was there. The grass murmured their names in that wind that blows only at the edge of speech. The blanket unfolded like a drawn breath. Buell lay back with her hands behind her, queen of an empire made of sky. Young tucked her scarf under her cheek and curled so her knees faced home, and Bean made a halo of her hair and started counting satellites. Jiun, to whom comfort arrived through the task, proceeded and produced small jars of candy ginger and tangerine peels, as if a picnic had been planned by the part of the heart that plans without telling. Jiun sat close enough to share warmth and far enough to keep a small chapel around her songs. "That one," Jess said, pointing. That's our house on winter nights. The bright, scattered air, and that's where the rice cooker blinks when it's done. There you encountered tracing with a fingertip. It's the face you make when you burn garlic and pretend you like it. Here we said, her voice a soft clink in the dark. Is Buell the first time she realized Aurora can be soft? Buell laughed, and there's Jess writing 100 stickers because one I love you has never felt like enough. Nothing wrong with the redundancies, Eugene murmured. We are each other's redundancies, and that's why it works. Jian tilted her head back and let a single line of melody escape. Not a lyric, just a tone that carried the shape of a promise. It sounded like all the songs they'd ever claimed by accident. Lucky breed through a window in summer. Ruled the world hum from a car at a stoplight, and the chorus a bridge that we can do and together. Their lullaby and the mothers that forgot that they taught them. And then Jess felt it settle into his ribs. He thought of the first time he'd tried a gesture like this. Years ago when he was poorer in practice and rich in intention, it had rained for days. He had typed a small notes to Buell's lamp, drink water. You're brilliant, take a nap. She'd found only the last one and slept with the note stuck to her cheek like a blessing. In the morning she'd woken and said, "This the kind of rich I like." "Hey Buell," said now, voice drifting toward drowsy. "Thank you for what he asked. For asking with a question mark," she said. "For giving me what the world never does, room." He turned to face her. The sky was the only color of an apricot that had spent its life trying to become a sunrise. "Stay with me," she said, very quietly, startling himself because he hadn't planned to say it tonight. She pretended to think, then pressed her foot to his ankle, answered older than language. They might have stayed until the night had exhausted its stars, but dawn likes a dramatic entrance, and they had all secretly waited and wanted to applaud. The grass shook its jewelry, the crickets closed shop, the air turned to milk. Buell fell asleep with her hand open on his chest, like a flight that forgot to switch off. Young slept with her hips barely parted, as if still speaking a blessing, and Dwayne dreamed with her smile on, a bravery she didn't admit, counted. Eugene arranged the empty jars in a triangle and wrote an invisible recipe for the moment. 3 hours of quiet, 2 fists of sky, 1 wall of proof. Jian didn't sleep, but the look on her face was that of rest. Looks like when it wears the clothes of wakefulness. When the first bird sang, the palace answered with its own morning rites. Kettles and broom bristles, a far timber door yawning, and they went home down a path that now accepted them not as visitors, but as family returning with dawn on their shoulders. In the kitchen, the aprons hung like a line of flags. Just cracked eggs, one-handed, and pretended not to be proud of the skill. Young brewed coffee with precise little circles, because love is a geometry too. Ween made toast and drew faces on each slice with jam, then tried to keep a straight face as she passed Buell with a slice with a dramatic eyebrow. Eugene played fruit in concentric rings like a secular mandala. Jian perched on the piano bench near the doorway and let 3 notes fall one by one into the room, notes that made everything taste more like life itself. They ate the way people eat when something has been settled, and after, when Jess rinsed dishes and the others tidied the night from the floor, Buell slipped away. He found her in the courtyard, tracing the sticker wall with the pads of her fingers like a blind woman reading a book she'd loved since childhood. She stopped at mine and at his star and breathed a sound that had laughter and ache braided into it. "Another sticker," she said without turning. "We're missing one." He looked. The wall felt complete to him in a way a shoreline feels complete before the next tide. "Which one?" he said. She produced an oval from her sleeve like a magician who knows the trick that only works if the audience wants it to. With tidy, certain letters, she wrote ours and placed it between the question and the star, not above, not below, between a hinge. When her thumb smoothed it, the sticker seemed to glow. Behind them, the footsteps approached, 4 kinds of care stepping lightly so as not to bruise the new. Young saw the new word and then touched her heart. Wayne grinned and bit her lip. Yejin exhaled through her nose, the sound she made when a plan nested into another plan. Jian closed her eyes and nodded, as if hearing a chord resolve at last. Buell turned. Bulty's love. Time later, she said, an eyebrow on the ascent, her mischief a herald for a whole different kind of tenderness. But first tonight, let's go back to the hill. I want to see if the wall changes and the stars too. Jess glanced at the sky that had already retired into its pale office. Then we'll bring a bigger blanket, he said. Bring nothing, young countered, her voice soft and certain. Bring ourselves. Wayne slipped her arm through Buell's and bring your radio, she said. We'll hum that song without words again. Yejin looked at Jess the way architects look at the ground before they draw. We'll write ours as we go, she said. Our walls, on air, on each other's backs, if we run out of pages. Jiun lifted her chin and said, I'll bring a chord we haven't used yet. She smiled at Jess, an old conspirator smile. There's room for it now. That night, they returned to the hill. The blanket, not a blanket so much as permission. The stars obliged, and the wind told a familiar gossip. And when Buell nestled under Jess's arm and tilted her mouth to his ear, she did not quite say a secret and not yet a vow. You asked and I answered. Now let's keep asking. He kissed her hair and remembered every sticker he had pressed to stone with his clumsy reverence. Every word a small arc above them, a meteor unthreaded itself and disappeared before the others could accuse it of showing off. Look, Wayne whispered, the syllable a single bell. Make a wish. No, Young said, smiling at the sky like it was a child finally asleep after a loud day. Let's make a memory and remember to keep it. Yejin laid her hand on the ground like she was checking a pulse. It's already keeping us, she said. Jiun's melody, barely there, wandered among them until it found a home in its chest and curled up. Beneath the hill, a courtyard wall kept shining words in the dark. Some places hold their declarations in marble that outlives the people who made them. This one kept them in paper and glue, which meant someone would always have to tend them. To the present edge in humidity, to the place bright after a storm. It meant love would never graduate from being a verb. It meant the wall would never stop changing because they wouldn't. Years from now, the wall would be crowned with more words than the space it's expected to hold. And then, the first lines would soften at their edges where fingertips had tested them on anxious mornings and touched them in gratitude on nights that remembered old fears. Children would be lifted up to add new words they learned from the family they'd been welcomed into, and guests would stop to steal a word for their pockets. A gardener would add water in tiny scripts behind the leaf. A grandmother would press enough like a kiss, and if the city ever forgot how to read, the wall would still speak in color. But that was all after. In the present, the 5 empresses and the man who would keep learning how to deserve them lay beneath a sky that refused to be measured, and they asked their small endless questions of each other, which is how any of us stays. When they came home, Buell paused before the wall once more, touched ours, and looked over her shoulder. Happy almost birthday, Jess said, because small accuracies are loved too. Buell smiled, the kind of smile that survives winter, Happy always, she answered. He reached for her hand, she gave it. The wall breathed again. And somewhere in the palace, a kettle sang 3 notes, soft as a memory saying, yes, yes, and yes. I create these stories, poems and little worlds each day for my beloved queen. If they bring you comfort or a smile too, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to join us on this little journey.